Percentages converting from fractions and decimals using number chips. This is a digital lesson, and this is the basketball version. So the next slide is a review for the students of what a percentage is. So it's a comparison out of 100. 45% would mean 45 out of 100. And then the students are shown some very basic, simple conversions. 56 hundredths as a decimal, which is 56 hundredths as a fraction, which is 56%. 73 hundredths, 73 hundredths, and 73%. And then one whole would be 100%. So on the next slide, this is a good practice slide. These are fairly simple conversions. 12 100ths would be 12%. Students are just going to click and hold on the edge of the chip. They're going to move it into place. 67 hundredths would be 67%. One whole would be 100%, and so on. So the next slide shows students how to convert from decimals to percentages by moving the decimal point 2 places to the right. So these two are fairly easy. When you get down to here, you have a whole number. So if we move the decimal point 2 numbers or 2 places to the right, we have 174%. And then here's an example. If they have to move the decimal point 2 places to the right and there's nothing here, we have to add a 0. So this is not 3%, but 30%. And the next slide, students are going to practice that. So here we have, this would be 70% if we move the decimal point 2 places to the right. This one would be 230%, 7%, and so on. Now, to convert a fraction to a percentage, students need to change their fraction to an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator, and then change it to a decimal, then a percent. So here you can see if you multiply the numerator and denominator by 5, you're going to get an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator. So students are going to do that on the next 3 slides. So here we know that we have to multiply 20 times 5 to get 100. So we're going to move the 100. And if they multiply the denominator times 5, they have to also multiply the numerator times 5. And they get an equivalent fraction of 30 hundredths. 30 hundredths as a decimal would just be a decimal point and 30 hundredths. And then that would be 30%. They're going to do the same thing on the next one. Here they know they have to multiply the numerator and denominator by 2. Next slide, same thing. And then they're shown what to do if they can't directly convert to an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator. They may have to simplify first. So on this one, we can't multiply 40 times any number to get 100ths, but if we simplify this fraction, we get 9/20ths, and then we can multiply the numerator and denominator by 5, get 45 hundredths or 45%. So both of these, they're simplifying first, and they're going to do that on the next 2 slides. So if they simplify 6/15ths, I can divide the numerator and denominator by 3, and I get 2/5. Now I want to convert it to an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator, so I'm going to multiply my numerator and denominator by 20. That gives me 40 hundredths, and then 40 hundredths as a decimal, which would be 40%. And every slide has every number the students need. So if they get to the end of a slide and the numbers aren't working, they know they've made an error somewhere and they have to go back and check. So in that way, it's self-checking. I'm going to do the same thing on the next slide. Now there are situations where they can't convert their fraction to a decimal, or they can't convert it to an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator. So the only thing they can do is use long division, 5 divided by 8. And here's an example of how that's done. We get a percentage of 62.5%. So the next slide, most of the division is done for them. They have to move the number chips into the correct place, and they have to move their decimal point into the correct place in their percentage. So here we have 1 divided by 8. Well, 8 goes into 10 one time. So we're going to move the 1. 8 times 1 is 8. Subtract, I get 2. Bring down a 0. 8 goes into 20 2 times. 8 times 2 is 16. If I subtract, I get 4. Bring down another 0. I get 40. And then 8 goes evenly into 45 times. So if we move the decimal point 2 places to the right, we will get the percentage. So the percentage would be 12. And we're going to move that decimal point, because it's movable also, 12.5%. The next slide has another division problem. This one they have to do all of the division themselves. So they've got number chips for every number they need. And again, if the numbers aren't working, they know they've made an error somewhere and they need to go back and check. Just make sure they move that decimal point in the correct place in their answer. So this is a digital lesson on percentages converting from fractions and decimals, and this one's basketball themed.